My wife's CEO boyfriend challenged me without knowing my background in elite cybersecurity. I made him find out the brutal way. Damien was adjusting his pristine designer jacket in the reflection of the lounge window when I walked in. "You must be the husband," he smirked. "Holly talks about your little mid-level-it job." I didn't respond, just headed to the high-top table and opened my battered laptop. "She says you've stagnated, that you don't intellectually stimulate her anymore." The lounge went quiet. Startup founders and angel investors stopped talking. Smartphones instantly came out. Damien loved it. He craved an audience before his keynote speech at the Austin Tech Summit. I told her real visionaries take what they want, and I want her, he added loudly. I finished typing my credentials. "What are you going to do, code monkey? Hack my email?" He laughed. "I'll have security toss you out in 5 seconds." I stood up slowly. Damien was 31, wore a ridiculous solid gold Rolex Daytona, and probably managed over 200 employees. He didn't know I spent 10 years as a penetration tester for the National Security Agency. 5 seconds? I asked calmly. "Watch this." I hit enter. Instantly, the lounge lighting, the massive 60-foot keynote screen visible through the glass doors, and Damien's smartphone all went black, then flashed blinding crimson. Damien's phone started blaring a high-pitched siren alarm. "What did you do?" he demanded. I stepped right into his personal space. "I locked your entire administrative access," I said quietly. "Now listen carefully." The crowd pressed closer, every investor recording. "You thought my wife was just a fun side project?" I tapped a key. The screens instantly displayed a massive, high-definition split screen. On the left, security footage of Holly and Damien entering a luxury penthouse in downtown Austin. Timestamps clear as day. Damien's face turned the color of wet ash. He clawed frantically at his completely frozen phone screen. "I'm locked out. That's the point," I said quietly. "You have zero control. I established a hidden tracking protocol across your corporate network a month ago. Found out everything. The thing about arrogant guys like you," I said, my voice cutting cleanly through the absolute silence of the room, "is you think venture capital makes you untouchable. You've never faced a real digital predator. You've never had someone trained to dismantle national infrastructure target your personal life." Damien literally shrank against the window, breathing heavily. "Shut off the projection," someone yelled. In a minute, I looked at the sea of phones. "Is everyone recording? Good. You're witnesses." I leaned closer to Damien's ear, quiet enough that only he could hear. "I could wipe your offshore crypto wallets right now. Financial obliteration in 90 seconds. You'd never raise another dime, never found a startup again. Hell, you wouldn't be able to buy coffee." His eyes went wide with sheer terror. "But I'm not going to do that," I said louder for the investors. "Because I'm not a criminal. I'm just a husband showing the board of directors exactly who they gave $50 million to." I stepped back. "Your turn to talk, Damien. Tell the investors what you've been doing with their Series B funding." He couldn't speak, just gasped for air under his designer suit. "No? Let me help you." I tapped the spacebar. "This is a Slack message from Damien to my wife last Tuesday. Quote, 'Your husband is a drone. I'll buy him off with a tiny severance.'" And here is my absolute favorite. The screen shifted to a massive wire transfer ledger. Damien explaining to Holly how to funnel $4 million of investor capital into a Cayman Islands shell company to buy a villa. Audible gasps erupted from the crowd of investors. Damien was shaking violently now, not from exertion, but from financial terror. "The SEC tip line is already ringing," I said calmly. I triggered the automated report, complete with your unencrypted ledgers, before I walked in. Right on cue, 2 men from legal compliance pushed through the crowd, flanked by event security. "Damien Cole," one said sharply. "The board needs you in the executive green room immediately. We're freezing your assets." Damien's legs gave out. He collapsed into a chair, clutching his chest, sobbing. Security pulled him up by his expensive lapels. Holly appeared in the VIP doorway. Her face went dead white seeing Damien dragged away, and the massive screens broadcasting her betrayal. "Grant, what did you do?" she whispered. I didn't answer her. I just reached down, closed my laptop, and slipped it into my messenger bag. The latch clicked shut, and in that dead silent room, it sounded like a gunshot. I walked right past her. She grabbed my forearm. Her fingers were cold and trembling. I didn't shake her off dramatically. I just stopped, looked down at her hand until she let go, and kept walking. The crowd of tech bros and angel investors parted from me like I was radioactive. No one said a word. The only sound was the faint, pathetic sobbing of Damien being dragged down the hallway by security. The walk to the parking garage was a blur of Austin heat and concrete. By the time I got to my Honda, my hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from the adrenaline crash. You spend a month meticulously planning the exact sequence of someone's destruction, reviewing the code, routing your traffic through 7 different proxy chains so it can never be traced back to your IP. And when it finally happens, it's just exhausting. I sat in the driver's seat for a full 10 minutes with the act blasting before I pulled out my phone. I had 34 missed calls. Most were from numbers I didn't recognize. Probably journalists or investors who had just watched the keynote screens burn Damien to the ground. 3 were from Holly. I ignored them all and opened my banking app. I needed to check my accounts. I had planned to move half of our joint savings into a separate checking account today, just to ensure I could cover the mortgage while the divorce went through. The app loaded. Available balance, $412.18. I stared at the screen. That was impossible. Yesterday morning, that account had $84,000 in it. It was the down payment money we had been saving for a house in Westlake. I tapped the transaction history. A single wire transfer had cleared at 9:00 a.m. that morning. $83,500. The recipient was a holding account for Fairfax and Associates. I dropped the phone onto the passenger seat. My chest tightened. I had spent all my energy tearing down Damien's empire, and I hadn't been watching my own back door. She had drained it. She had actually drained everything before the summit even started. I put the car in drive and headed home. I needed to lock down the house. I needed to change the Wi-Fi passwords, the smart lock codes, everything. When I pulled into the driveway of our rental in East Austin, Holly's Audi wasn't there. Good. I went inside. The house smelled like her expensive Santal perfume, and there was a half-empty mug of coffee sitting on the kitchen island from when she left this morning to go support her visionary boyfriend. It made me sick to look at it. I dumped it in the sink. I had just sat down at the kitchen table and opened my laptop to start changing the security credentials on the house when my phone rang. The caller ID said Holt Novak. Holt was my boss at the IT firm. He was a decent guy, deeply risk-averse, the kind of manager who worried about everything. I answered on the second ring. "Grant, where are you?" Holt's voice was tight, higher than usual. "I'm at home, Holt. Why? Did you go to the Austin Tech Summit today?" I paused. I did. I heard Holt exhale heavily. "We just got got a call from the legal department at Vanguard Capital, Damien Cole's VC backers. They're claiming a cyber attack originated from an employee at our firm. Grant, the entire executive board over there is out for blood. The SEC is freezing accounts. Cole is in custody. What the hell did you do? I exposed a fraud, Holt, and I didn't do it on company hardware or company time. It doesn't matter. Holt barked. They have lawyers crawling all over us. We contract for Vanguard. Grant, they're threatening to pull a $2 million service agreement unless we cooperate with a full internal investigation. I've been ordered to suspend you, without pay. You need to hand over your company laptop and keycard by tomorrow morning. I gripped the edge of the kitchen table. Holt, listen to me. No, you listen. Do not log into the VPN. Do not talk to any clients. You're completely locked out as of 3 minutes ago. I'm sorry, man, but you brought a nuclear bomb into my backyard. The line went dead. I put the phone down. The house was dead quiet. I was broke. I was suspended. And my wife was currently holding 80 grand of my money. An hour later, the front door unlocked. I didn't move from the kitchen island. Holly walked in. She wasn't alone. Her older sister, Ren, was 2 steps behind her. Ren looked incredibly uncomfortable, refusing to make eye contact with me. Holly, on the other hand, looked like she had been crying, but her posture was rigid. Defensive. I'm just here to pack a bag, Holly said, her voice tight. Take your time, I said evenly. You should probably pack light. The SEC is going to be seizing Damien's penthouse by the end of the week. You won't have much closet space in federal holding. Stop it, Holly snapped. She walked into the kitchen, her eyes flashing. You ruined him. You completely ruined him, Grant. He lost his company today. The board voted him out an hour ago. He's having a panic attack in a lawyer's office right now. He was funneling $4 million into a shell company, I replied, keeping my voice flat. I didn't ruin him. Math did. And greed. He was doing that for us. She yelled. For me. Because he actually wanted to build a life. What were you doing, Grant? Sitting in this cramped rental, playing with code. Perfectly happy to be a nobody for the rest of your life. He gave me ambition. He gave me a future. He gave you a wire fraud charge. I corrected her. By the way, where's my $83,000? Holly flinched. She actually took a step back. She glanced at Ren, who was standing awkwardly near the front door. Ren suddenly found the floorboards fascinating. I needed a retainer, Holly said, her voice dropping into that quiet, reasonable tone she used when she knew she was dead wrong. For the divorce. Soren Fairfax is one of the best asset division lawyers in the state. I knew you were going to be angry when you found out about Damien, and I had to protect myself. You drained the entire account, I said. You didn't take half. You took everything. Soren's retainer is expensive, she said, lifting her chin. And you have your salary. You'll be fine. I was just suspended without pay because your boyfriend's VC firm called my boss. That stopped her. For a second, a flicker of genuine guilt crossed her face, but it was quickly swallowed by self-preservation. I'm going upstairs to pack, she muttered, turning away. I let her go. There was no point in arguing with someone who had already rewritten history to make themselves the victim. I sat back down at the laptop. If Vanguard Capital was threatening my employer, they were looking for an IP trace. They were looking for the exact route I used to pull Damien's Slack messages and financial ledgers. I wasn't worried. I had spoofed the MAC address, routed the connection through a VPN in Switzerland, bounced it to a server in Iceland, and finally through an encrypted tunnel in Singapore. There was zero digital paper trail back to this house. The National Security Agency trains you to be a ghost, and I was a very good ghost. I opened my terminal to run a routine diagnostic on my home network, just to be absolutely certain my local router logs were wiped clean of any outbound traffic from this morning. I typed the command to pull the admin logs. The black screen populated with lines of white text. I scrolled down. I stopped. My breath caught in my throat. There was an active connection protocol running on my personal machine. It wasn't mine. It was a backdoor. A simple, elegant, commercially available remote access Trojan. It had been sitting quietly in my system files for exactly 3 weeks. I stared at the screen, my heart slamming against my ribs. You can't install a rat on my machine remotely. My firewalls would flag it instantly. Someone had to physically sit at this laptop, plug in a USB drive, and execute the file. I looked up at the ceiling. I could hear Holly's footsteps upstairs, moving back and forth across the bedroom. 3 weeks ago, I was in Dallas for a weekend at conference. Holly was home alone. I rapidly typed a command to trace the destination IP of the remote access tool. I needed to know where my data was being sent. The terminal blinked, then spit out the IP address. I didn't even need to run a reverse lookup. I recognized the subnet mask. It was the internal network block for Vanguard Capital, Damien's company. They hadn't just been stealing investor money. Damien knew who I was. He knew my background, and he had used Holly to install a backdoor on my personal machine to frame me for the $4 million embezzlement. If the feds audited Damien's servers, the digital trail of the stolen money would lead straight back to my IP address. My phone vibrated on the table. It was an email. Sender, Soren Fairfax. Subject, notice of injunction and imminent law enforcement action. I didn't open it. I just sat there in the quiet kitchen, listening to my wife pack her bags upstairs, realizing that the game hadn't ended at the tech summit. It was only just starting. I clicked the email from Soren Fairfax. I didn't want to read it, but ignoring a shark doesn't make it swim away. The text was dense with legal jargon, but the core message was crystal clear. An emergency ex-parte motion had been filed in Travis County. They were requesting an immediate freeze on all my personal accounts, a physical restraining order, and a sweeping injunction preventing me from accessing any shared digital assets or home networks. But the kicker was buried in the third paragraph. Fairfax wasn't just representing Holly in a standard asset division. He had explicitly outlined her status as a cooperating witness in a corporate espionage investigation. They were already spinning the narrative. Damien wasn't the mastermind. I was. According to the draft injunction attached to the email, I had used my background to hack Vanguard Capital, steal the $4 million, frame Damien out of jealous spite, and siphon the funds into the Cayman Shell Company. Holly was supposedly the terrified wife who had discovered my criminal enterprise and was now fleeing for her safety. It was a brilliant, desperate countermove. Damien had clearly planned this contingency. If his embezzlement ever came to light, he had a perfectly constructed scapegoat sitting in East Austin, completely oblivious, with the exact technical resume required to make the lie believable. And my wife had handed him the keys. Footsteps echoed on the stairs. Holly was coming down, dragging a sleek silver away suitcase. Ren was carrying a smaller duffel bag, her eyes glued to the floor. I turned the laptop screen toward the kitchen so they couldn't see the terminal window running the trace on the Vanguard back door. I'm taking the Audi, Holly said. She didn't look at me. She kept her focus focus on the front door, slipping her sunglasses onto her head. Soren said not to discuss the logistics with you. All communication goes through his office starting tomorrow. When did you plug it in, I asked. She stopped, her hand hovering over the doorknob. What? The USB drive, I said, keeping my voice perfectly level. When did Damien give it to you? Did he tell you it was just a tool to scrape my financial records for the divorce? Or did he tell you exactly what it was? Holly's jaw tightened. She looked at Ren, then back to me. I don't know what you're talking about, Grant. Stop being paranoid. 3 weeks ago, I said. I was in Dallas for the network security conference. You were here. You had physical access to my machine. You plugged in a flash drive and ran an executable file. I'm just curious if you knew you were installing a remote access Trojan that gave Damien full control of my IP address, or if you were just following your visionary boyfriend's instructions blindly. Ren shifted her weight, finally looking up. Holly, what is he talking about? Nothing. Holly snapped, her face flushing a deep, guilty red. He's just making things up because he's angry. He's trying to scare me. He used it to route the stolen $4 million through this house, Holly. He made it look like I did it. And now his lawyers are using you as the star witness to put me in federal prison so he can walk away clean. I stood up from the stool. He didn't just steal my money. He used you to build his alibi. For a fraction of a second, the defensive wall dropped. I saw genuine confusion, followed immediately by a sharp spike of fear in her eyes. She hadn't known. Damien had played her too. He had given her a drive, probably told her it was a harmless piece of software to ensure I wasn't hiding money from her, and she had plugged it right into the machine of the man she had sworn to spend her life with. You're lying, she whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. It was hollow. Soren Fairfax just emailed me, I said. Read the draft injunction. Ask your own lawyer what narrative they're building. You're not going to be a wealthy CEO's wife, Holly. You're an accessory to wire fraud. She didn't say another word. She grabbed the handle of the silver suitcase, yanked the front door open, and walked out into the heat. Ren hesitated for a moment, looking at me with something that felt uncomfortably close to pity, before hurrying out after her sister. The door clicked shut. I locked the deadbolt. Then I went back to the kitchen island, disconnected my laptop from the home Wi-Fi, and hard-killed the machine's wireless card. I was completely isolated now. No internet, no phone connection to the outside world. Just me and a compromised machine. I needed a clean device, and I needed an attorney. But I had $412.18 to my name, and Vanguard Capital had a bottomless war chest. I couldn't fight them in a courtroom right now. I had to fight them where they couldn't see me. I walked into the guest bedroom, which doubled as my office, and opened the closet. Behind a stack of old winter coats in a plastic storage bin, there was a heavy, fireproof safe bolted to the floorboards. I punched in the 6-digit code. Inside sat a thick stack of physical documents, a few old hard drives, and a brand new factory-sealed laptop I had bought off Craigslist a year ago using cash. It had never been connected to my home network. It had never even been turned on. I pulled it out, stripped the plastic wrap, and carried it to the living room. I booted the clean machine and inserted a bootable Linux USB drive I kept on my keychain. Within 2 minutes, I was operating on a completely sterile system, routing my connection through a mobile hotspot I had bought under a fake name at a gas station 3 months ago for an emergency exactly like this. I opened an encrypted messaging app and typed in a handle I hadn't used in 4 years. Need a favor. Quiet and heavy. I stared at the screen, waiting. 10 minutes passed. The house was completely silent, the afternoon sun casting long, heavy shadows across the hardwood floor. Finally, a reply popped up. Cora, you're supposed to be playing suburbanate guy. What broke? Me. Everything. Need a forensic accountant who doesn't ask questions. They framed me for a $4 corporate bleed and drained my personal accounts to pay their retainer. Cora, messy. Give me the target. Me. Vanguard Capital. Specifically Damien Cole's offshore shells. Cora, you're picking fights with VC money now? Give me an hour. Don't move. Cora and I went way back. Before I settled into the quiet, stagnant life Holly so deeply despised, Cora and I had worked in the same dark rooms in Maryland. She was a tracer. She could follow digital money through a dozen international borders and make it look like a leisurely stroll. While I waited, I turned my attention back to my compromised laptop. I needed an airtight forensic image of the hard drive exactly as it was right now. If the feds kicked my door in tomorrow morning, I needed immutable proof of the backdoor Damien had installed, including the precise timestamp of its execution. I connected an external drive and started the imaging process. As the progress bar slowly crawled across the screen, my phone vibrated on the counter. It was an unknown number. I let it ring. It stopped, then immediately started ringing again. The persistence usually meant law enforcement or someone very angry. I picked it up. Hello, Grant. The voice was deep, smooth, and heavily modulated to project calm authority. It didn't work. I could hear the microscopic tremor of stress beneath it. Damien, I said, are you calling me from the executive green room, or did they let you use the phone in the holding cell? I'm at my lawyer's office, he said softly. You put on a hell of a show today. Very cinematic. I underestimated your flair for the dramatic. You underestimated a lot of things. Maybe, Damien conceded, his voice dropping into a conspiratorial whisper. But you overplayed your hand. You broke into a secured corporate network. You stole proprietary data. You violated federal wiretapping laws. My legal team is drafting the federal complaint right now. By this time tomorrow, the FBI will be pulling your hard drives. They'll find a very interesting remote access Trojan when they do, I replied. The one you had Holly install on the 12th. Silence on the line. Just the faint sound of ambient office noise in the background. I don't know what you're talking about, Damien said slowly. You're recording this, I realized, smiling grimly. Trying to bait a confession. That's smart. Fairfax told you to do that, didn't he? But here's the problem, Damien. You're playing checkers. You think because you have a VC firm backing you, you can brute force reality. But the blockchain doesn't care about your lawyers. You're a disgruntled husband, Damien said, clearly speaking for the recording. You're trying to extort me. I'm trying to survive, I said. And since you took my $83,000 to pay for Soren Fairfax, I don't have much to lose. If I go down, the unredacted ledgers go directly to the Wall Street Journal, not the SEC, the press. I'll burn Vanguard's reputation to ash before I let you put me in a cage. I hung up and powered off the phone. The imaging process on my laptop finished with a soft chime. I unplugged the external drive and shoved it into my pocket. My encrypted chat with Cora pinged. Cora, found your Cayman's shell. It's sloppy. They layered it through 2 holding companies in Delaware, but the signatory on the final account isn't Damien Cole. I frowned, typing back quickly. Me, who is it? Cora, it's Holly. I sat back in the chair, the air rushing out of my lungs. Damien hadn't just used her to plant the back door. He hadn't just used her to drain my accounts. He had made her the legal owner of the offshore shell holding the stolen $4 million. She was the bag holder. When the authorities finally traced the money, they wouldn't just find my IP address orchestrating the hack. They would find Holly's signature on the destination account. He was setting us both up to take the fall while he walked away a victim of a husband and wife extortion scheme. I stared at the empty kitchen, the lingering scent of Holly's perfume finally fading into the stale air of the house. She had burned our marriage to the ground for a man who had engineered her absolute destruction. And now, the only way to save myself was to tear apart the woman I had spent the last 6 years loving. I typed a reply to Cora. Me. Pull the incorporation documents. I need to see her signature. Cora. Dropping them in the secure folder now. It's a digital trail. DocuSign. I opened the encrypted folder and downloaded the PDF. It was a standard corporate formation packet for a Cayman Islands exempted company. The kind of boilerplate paperwork high net worth individuals use to shield assets from domestic taxes. But right there, on page 14, was Holly's digital signature. I checked the timestamp. May 12th. My stomach turned over. May 12th was a Tuesday. I remembered that day perfectly because it was the day after our 6th wedding anniversary. We had gone to a mediocre Italian place downtown because it was all I could afford without dipping into the house fund. Holly had been quiet all night, staring at her phone, giving me tight, closed-mouth smiles. The next morning, she had sat at this exact kitchen island, drinking her expensive coffee, and signed the paperwork to become the sole proprietor of an offshore shell company designed to hold stolen venture capital. She had sold me out before the anniversary dinner even digested. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. The emotional weight of it was suffocating, but I couldn't afford to feel it right now. I had to think like a penetration tester. When you're breached, you don't mourn the compromised server. You isolate it, you build a perimeter, and you hunt the intruder. I needed to move. If Soren Fairfax had filed an emergency injunction, a process server or a Travis County Sheriff's deputy was going to be knocking on my door any minute. If I was served with the order, I would be legally compelled to hand over all my hardware and stay off the internet. If I wasn't home to receive the papers, I bought myself time. In the legal system, time is the only currency that matters. I grabbed a dark canvas duffel bag from the hall closet and started packing. 7 pairs of socks, underwear, t-shirts, my only suit. I went into the bathroom and swept my toiletries into a dop kit. I purposely left Holly's expensive moisturizers and serums untouched on the counter. Back in the guest room, I emptied the fireproof safe. I took the backup cash, about $1,200 in 50s, my passport, and a stack of old NSA commendations that Holly had once called cute. I threw it all into the duffel. I walked back to the kitchen. My compromised laptop was still sitting on the island. I left it plugged in and running. I opened a dummy terminal window and ran a continuous ping script to a random server in Eastern Europe, just to generate useless outbound traffic. Let Damien's IT guys at Vanguard monitor that for the next 48 hours. Let them think I was sitting here, desperately trying to cover my tracks. I grabbed my clean laptop, the cloned hard drive, and my burner phone. I walked out the back door, locking the deadbolt behind me. The Texas heat hit me like a physical blow as I crossed the dry grass of the backyard. I slipped through the broken slat in the wooden fence and walked 2 blocks down to where I had parked my Honda. I didn't want to leave from the driveway. If someone was already watching the house, I wanted them to think I was still inside. I got in the car, blasted the ACK, and drove east. I didn't take the highway. I stuck to the feeder roads and side streets, keeping my speed exactly at the limit. I needed a place to work, somewhere cash-friendly and entirely disconnected from my normal life. I found a cinderblock motel off Highway 290, the kind of place with a flickering neon sign and weeds growing through the cracked asphalt of the parking lot. The woman at the front desk didn't look up from her phone when I slid a $100 bill across the laminate counter. She handed me a physical brass key attached to a faded plastic diamond. Room 114. The room smelled like stale cigarette smoke and industrial pine cleaner. The bedspread was a muted, depressing floral print. It was perfect. I set up my workstation on the cheap veneer desk. I connected my phone to the laptop via USB, tethering the data connection through the encrypted tunnel. As soon as I was online, I opened a secure browser and searched for Declan Aldrich. Declan was a former federal prosecutor who had burned out spectacularly 5 years ago, lost his clearance, and reinvented himself as a private defense consultant. He didn't work for white shoe law firms. He worked out of a strip mall in North Austin, defending gray hat hackers, corporate whistleblowers, and people who had crossed the wrong billionaires. He owed me a favor from 3 years ago, when I helped him untangle a messy digital evidence chain that kept one of his clients out of federal prison. I found his office number and dialed it from the burner. Aldrich, a gruff voice answered. He sounded exactly the same, exhausted, cynical, and deeply caffeinated. Declan, it's Grant. A pause. I heard the clatter of a keyboard stop. Grant, I was just reading about your wife's boyfriend on TechCrunch. Hell of a keynote speech you gave today. The whole city is talking about it. I need representation, I said, skipping the pleasantries. I'm effectively broke. My accounts are frozen. My employer suspended me, and Vanguard Capital is trying to frame me for a $4 million corporate bleed. Declan whistled low. You don't do things by halves, do you? Where are you? A motel off 290. I'm off the grid. Soren Fairfax is filing an emergency ex parte against me. They're going to try to seize my hardware. Soren Fairfax, Declan repeated, the amusement completely draining from his voice. Christ, Grant, Fairfax doesn't play the game, he buys the board. If he's filing an ex parte, he's not just trying to take your laptops. He's trying to build a narrative that you're a flight risk or a danger to the public. Have you been served? No, I left the house before they could. Good, stay gone. Text me the address of the motel from a secure line. I'm coming to you. Are you taking the case? I asked. I'm coming to look at the paperwork, Declan corrected. If you actually stole $4 million from a VC firm, I'm going to tell you to surrender to the FBI. If you didn't, I'll see what I can do to keep you out of a jumpsuit. Give me 40 minutes. He hung up. I leaned back in the creaky wooden desk chair and rubbed my eyes. The adrenaline from the tech summit had completely worn off, leaving behind a hollow, aching exhaustion. I opened my encrypted chat with Cora. Me, I need you to look at Holly's digital signature again. Check the routing data on the DocuSign email. I need to know what IP address she was connected to when she signed it. It took her 5 minutes. Cora, IP traces to Vanguard Capital's main office network in downtown Austin, specifically the executive suite subnet. I closed my eyes. She hadn't just signed it over coffee. She had been physically in Damien's office. He had probably poured her a mimosa, kissed her neck, and slid an iPad across his mahogany desk, telling her her to sign some paperwork so he could buy them a house. And she had done it, blindly trusting the man in the designer suit while she plotted to serve me divorce papers. 45 minutes later, there was 3 sharp knocks on the motel room door. I checked the peephole. Declan stood outside, wearing a wrinkled linen suit and holding a battered leather briefcase. He looked older than I remembered, his hairline receding further, deep bags under his eyes. I unlocked the door and let him in. He walked past me, dropped his briefcase on the floral bedspread, and looked around the room in disgust. Very glamorous, Declan said. You know, when people tell me they used to work for the NSA, I usually expect them to have a better bug-out location than a place that rents by the hour. I'm on a budget, I said. Did you pull the filings? Declan unlatched his briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of printed documents. He tossed them onto the desk next to my laptop. I pulled everything Fairfax filed with the Travis County clerk in the last 4 hours, Declan said, his tone turning entirely professional. It's worse than you thought. I picked up the top document. It wasn't an injunction regarding digital assets. It was a petition for a temporary guardianship and a psychological evaluation hold. Read the affidavits, Declan said, pointing a finger at the paper. Your wife signed a sworn statement claiming you have a history of paranoid delusions. She claims you've been stalking her, that you fabricated this entire embezzlement scheme in your head to destroy Damian Cole, and that you've been threatening self-harm if she leaves you. They aren't just trying to freeze your assets, Grant. They're trying to get a judge to declare you mentally unfit. I stared at the black ink on the page. The words blurred together. Erratic behavior, delusions of persecution, technical sabotage as a cry for help. If a judge signs off on this, Declan continued, his voice dropping into a grim register, Vanguard's private security doesn't even have to wait for the FBI to build a cybercrimes case against you. They can have local police pick you up on a mental health warrant tonight. They put you in a 72-hour psychiatric hold, they declare you incompetent, and they legally seize your house, your car, and your hardware, under the guise of protecting you from yourself. She knows I'm not crazy, I said softly, the betrayal hitting a brand new agonizing depth. It doesn't matter what she knows, Declan said. It matters what Fairfax can sell to a judge. And right now, he's selling the story of a tragic, deranged guy who snapped when he found out his wife was leaving him for a billionaire. I dropped the papers back onto the desk. They planted a backdoor on my personal machine 3 weeks ago, a remote access Trojan. They routed the stolen $4 million through my IP address, and Damien had Holly sign the incorporation papers for the Destination Shell Company in the Caymans. She's the legal owner of the stolen money. Declan went completely still. He stared at me for a long moment, the gears turning in his head. You can prove this? He asked quietly. I cloned the drive, I said, tapping the silver square sitting next to my laptop. I have the exact timestamp of the malware installation. I was in Dallas at a conference. I have hotel receipts, flight records, and conference badge swipes proving I wasn't physically in the house to install it. Only Holly was. Declan let out a slow, heavy breath. He ran a hand over his face, suddenly looking incredibly energized. Damien is a dead man walking, Declan muttered, almost to himself. Vanguard's board just fired him today because of your stunt at the summit. He's radioactive. Fairfax is trying to clean up the mess, but if Vanguard finds out Damien exposed the entire firm to federal racketeering charges by framing an innocent citizen, they'll bury him themselves. So we go to the board, I said. No, Declan snapped. We don't go anywhere near Vanguard yet. Vanguard has unlimited money. If they realize Damien left a trail pointing back to them, their first instinct won't be to turn him in. It will be to cover it up. If they know you have proof of the frame job, you go from being a nuisance to an existential threat. They will crush you. They will bury you in litigation until you run out of money, or they will make sure you end up in a psych ward. My burner phone buzzed on the desk. I glanced at the screen. It was an encrypted email notification, not from Cora. I opened the message. The sender address was a string of random alphanumeric characters. The subject line was empty. Body, Mr. Keating, you made a compelling argument today at the summit. Some of us found it very educational. Damien Cole is currently being handled by our legal department. However, we understand you have access to additional, unredacted ledgers. We would like to discuss a mutually beneficial arrangement before the authorities become fully involved. A car can be sent to your location. Do not contact Mr. Cole or Mr. Fairfax. I turned the screen toward Declan. He read it, his jaw tightening. Who is it? I asked. That's Vanguard, Declan said softly. The board of directors. They're bypassing Damien. They want the raw data you stole from Damien's network, and they want to buy your silence before the sec starts asking for it. They're offering a payoff. They're offering a trap, Declan corrected. If you get in a car with Vanguard security, you're handing them the only leverage you have. They'll take your hardware, dump you on the side of the road, and let Fairfax proceed with the psychological hold. Then what's the play? Declan walked over to the motel window, peeking through the dusty blinds at the dark parking lot. We need to weaponize the wife. She's the weak link. Fairfax is using her as a shield, but if she realizes she's actually holding the bag for the $4 million, she'll flip. We need to show Holly the Cayman incorporation documents. She won't talk to me, I said, the bitterness rising in my throat. She took 80 grand of my money and walked out with her sister. She won't talk to the crazy abusive husband she described in the affidavit, Declan said, turning back to me. But she'll talk to her lawyer, and she'll definitely talk if she thinks she's going to federal prison. Declan walked back to the bed and grabbed his briefcase. Send me the digital signature file and the IP trace. I'm going to draft a countersuit. We don't file it yet, but we use it as a hammer. And the board's email? I asked. Ignore it, Declan said. Let them sweat. The longer you stay silent, the more panicked they get. Declan left. I locked the deadbolt behind him, feeling the absolute isolation of the motel room press in on me. I sat back down at the desk and stared at the glowing screen of the clean laptop. I opened the Cayman documents one more time, looking at Holly's signature. 6 years of marriage, 6 years of building a quiet, stable life, and she had traded it all for a designer lifestyle built on fraud. My burner phone buzzed again. I expected it to be Declan, or maybe Cora, but it was a standard text message. Grant, it's Ren. I stopped breathing. Ren was Holly's older sister. She had been at the house. She had helped Holly pack. Ren, are you safe? Holly told Soren she thinks you have a gun. The police just broke down the door of your house. Grant, they're tearing the place apart looking for you. I stared at the glowing screen of the burner phone. I don't own a gun. I've never owned a gun. Holly despised firearms. We didn't even keep a baseball bat by the front door. Soren Fairfax knew exactly what he was doing. If you want a judge to sign an emergency psychological hold on a Sunday afternoon, you claim the subject is a danger to themselves. If you want the police to execute that warrant by kicking the door off its hinges with their weapons lines drawn, and their body cameras rolling. You tell dispatch the subject is armed and unstable. Fairfax was trying to get me killed. Or, at the very least, terrified into making a mistake that would justify his narrative of a deranged, violent husband. My thumbs hovered over the cheap digital keyboard. Me, I don't have a gun. Ren, you know I don't. I watched the 3 gray typing dots appear, disappear, and reappear. Ren, I know. I told her that. But Soren was on speakerphone. He told her she couldn't be sure, that you were highly trained and capable of hiding things from her. The cop showed up 5 minutes after we left. I'm parked at the Walgreens on 7th. Grant, there are 4 cruisers. They went in with rifles. My chest felt hollow. I pictured the cramped rental house, the cheap laminate floors, the kitchen island where I ate breakfast every morning. I pictured Austin PD tearing through my closet, ripping apart the guest room, pulling the fireproof safe out of the floorboards. I had to move the pieces on the board right now. Declan was right. Vanguard was too big. Fairfax was too protected. Holly was the only weak point. Me, stay at the Walgreens. I'm sending you a file. Open it, read page 14, and then call me on this number. I tethered the burner to the clean laptop, opened the encrypted folder Cora had sent me, and attached the PDF of the Cayman Islands Incorporation documents. I hit send. The silence in the motel room was absolute. Only the low hum of the window act unit broke the tension. I watched the digital clock on the bottom right of my screen. 2 minutes passed. Then 3. The burner phone lit up. I answered it. Did you look at it? What is this? Ren's voice was a harsh, breathless whisper. Grant, what am I looking at? Is this real? It's a digital incorporation packet for an offshore holding company, I said flatly. Filed on May 12th, the day after our anniversary. Look at the signatory. It's Holly's digital signature, Ren said, her voice trembling. But I don't understand. Why does she have a Cayman company? She doesn't, I said. Damien does. He set it up to hold the $4 million he embezzled from Vanguard Capital, but he didn't put his name on it. He put hers, and then he used my IP address to route the stolen money into it. He engineered this whole thing so that when the audit inevitably happened, the feds would look at the data and see a disgruntled IT worker hacking the firm to steal money for his wife. Oh my God, Ren breathed. The sound of a passing siren echoed through the speaker. She doesn't know. Grant, I swear to you, she doesn't know. She thinks Damien is a victim. She thinks you destroyed his company out of jealousy. Damien is letting her think that, I said. And Soren Fairfax is being paid with my money to make sure she sticks to the script. But Soren doesn't work for Holly. He works for Vanguard. The second the FBI gets involved, Soren is going to hand them those documents and throw Holly to the wolves. She's going to federal prison. Ren for wire fraud. No, Ren said, her voice cracking. No, she wouldn't. She wouldn't survive that. She's stupid, Grant. She's vain, and she's selfish, and she was blinded by the money. But she's not a criminal mastermind. I know she isn't, I said. But the paper trail says she is. Where is she right now? She's at the Four Seasons downtown. Soren booked her a suite under a corporate account. He told her she needed a secure location until the police had you in custody. Is she alone? No. Soren put a private security contractor at the door. He said it was to protect her from you. I closed my eyes, rubbing the bridge of my nose. They were sequestering the witness. They were isolating Holly so she couldn't see the news, couldn't talk to anyone outside of Vanguard's control, and definitely couldn't talk to me. Once they had her fully brainwashed into believing I was a violent threat, they would have her sign whatever sworn affidavits they needed to close the loop on the frame job. Ren, I need you to go to the hotel. I can't, Ren said quickly. The security guy wouldn't let me up. Holly had to come down to the lobby to give me my car keys. Soren told her she shouldn't be communicating with anyone, even family, until the injunction is finalized. She's a hostage, I said, the reality of the situation clicking into place. She just doesn't realize it yet. What do we do? Ren asked. The hostility she had shown me at the house was completely gone. She was terrified for her sister. I need a direct line to her. I need to show her these documents. If she realizes Damien set her up to take the fall, she'll turn on him. But she has to hear it from me, and she has to see the proof. How? Her phone is being monitored. Soren took her iPhone and gave her a new one. He said her old device was compromised because you're a hacker. Clever. Fairfax was neutralizing my ability to reach her under the guise of cybersecurity. I have an idea, Ren said suddenly. Her voice dropped lower. Holly's dog, the French bulldog. She left him at the rental because the Four Seasons wouldn't let her check him into the executive suite without a deposit, and she didn't want to deal with it while she was packing. Buster is still at the house? I asked. Yes, she's been texting me, panicking about him. She wants me to go back and get him, but I told her I wasn't going near that house with the police there. Ren took a shaky breath. If I go get the dog tomorrow morning, I can demand to bring him to her. The security guard can't stop me from dropping off her pet. I could slip a burner phone into his carrier. It was risky, but it was low-tech, and low-tech usually beats high-tech when the adversary is relying on digital walls. Okay, I said. Meet me in an hour. There's a 24-hour diner off I-35, just past the slaughterhouse exit. It's called the Night Owl. Don't use your GPS to get there. Just drive. I'll be there. I hung up. I quickly wiped the browser history on the clean laptop, closed the lid, and shoved it into the canvas duffel bag. I left the compromised machine exactly where it was, still running the dummy ping script to Eastern Europe. I stepped out of the motel room into the humid night air. The neon sign buzzed aggressively overhead. I got into the Honda, keeping the headlights off until I was out of the parking lot. The Night Owl diner was a relic of the 1990s, all cracked red vinyl booths and fluorescent lights that made everyone look slightly jaundiced. At 2 in the morning, the clientele consisted of long-haul truckers and exhausted shift workers. I slid into a corner booth facing the door. I ordered a black coffee from a waitress who looked like she hadn't slept since Thursday. 20 minutes later, Ren walked in. She looked a wreck. Her expensive blowout was falling flat, and the makeup around her eyes was smudged. She spotted me and quickly slid into the booth opposite me, clutching her purse tightly to her chest. Did you get the phone? I asked. She nodded, pulling a cheap plastic prepaid smartphone out of her bag. I bought it with cash at the Walgreens right after we hung up. I didn't activate it yet. Good, I took the phone from her, cracked the plastic back off, and removed the battery. I checked the SIM card, ensuring it was a generic prepaid network. I popped the battery back in and powered it up. I'm going to install an encrypted messaging app. It's point-to-point, no server retention. If Fairfax takes the phone from her, he won't be able to pull the chat logs. Ren watched me work, her hands trembling as she wrapped them around her coffee mug. She really thought she was going to have it all, you know, Ren whispered. I didn't look up from the screen. I know. She talked about him constantly. Damien this, Damien that. He was going to take her to St. Bart's. He was going to buy her a house in Westlake. She told me you were holding her back, Grant. She said you had no drive. Ren swallowed hard. I'm sorry. sorry. I shouldn't have believed her. She's very convincing when she wants to be, I said, my voice completely devoid of emotion. I couldn't afford to feel the sting of it right now. How did the flash drive happen? The one she plugged into my laptop. Ren frowned, thinking back. About 3 weeks ago. She called me, really excited. She said Damien had given her this custom software program. He told her that with your NSA background, you were definitely hiding cryptocurrency in offline wallets. He said the program would scrape your hardware and find the hidden accounts so she could claim half in the divorce. I let out a slow, dark laugh. It was a perfect lie. It weaponized Holly's greed and my technical background simultaneously. She plugged it in before she went to yoga. Ren continued. She told me she watched a little progress bar fill up, and then it said sync complete. She thought she had caught you hiding money. She was actually proud of herself. She installed a remote access Trojan, I said, handing the burner phone back to Ren. It gave Damien total administrative control over my network. He sat in his glass office, logged into my router, and funneled Vanguard's money to the Caymans, using my digital fingerprint. Ren took the phone, staring at it like it was a live grenade. I'll put it under the blanket in Buster's carrier tomorrow morning. I'll tell her to check the blanket. Tell her to message me immediately, I said. And tell her under no circumstances should she sign any more documents for Soren Fairfax. Nothing. Not even a lunch receipt. Ren nodded quickly. She looked down at her own phone, which had been buzzing silently on the table for the last minute. She tapped the screen to read the text. All the blood instantly drained from her face. What is it? I asked, leaning forward. Ren looked up at me, her eyes wide with panic. Grant, it's Holly. What does it say? She says Soren just came into her suite. He's not alone. He has 2 men with him. They're telling her she has to leave the hotel right now. Ren's voice hitched. They're putting her on a private charter to a Vanguard corporate retreat in Aspen. Tonight, Soren told her it's an emergency, that you breached the hotel's security network and you know what room she's in. I went dead still. They weren't waiting until morning. Fairfax knew the narrative was fragile as long as Holly was in Austin. If the local police didn't find me with a gun, the story of the violently deranged hacker started to leak water. They needed the star witness completely off the board, locked in a snowed-in compound in Colorado, where she couldn't accidentally see the news or talk to her sister. Once she was in Aspen, she belonged to Vanguard. Call her, I said sharply. Right now. Ren fumbled with her phone, hitting the dial button and putting it on speaker. It rang once, twice. Hello? Holly's voice was tight, breathless. I could hear movement in the background, suitcases zipping, heavy footsteps on thick hotel carpet. Holly, it's me, Ren said, her voice shaking. Don't go with them. Holly, you have to stay in Austin. I can't, Ren, Holly said, her voice trembling with manufactured terror. Grant knows I'm here. Soren said he hacked the reservation system. The police missed him at the house. He's coming for me. Holly, listen to me, I said, leaning close to the phone. The line went dead silent. Grant? Holly whispered. The absolute horror in her voice hit me like a physical blow. She genuinely believed I was coming to hurt her. Damien had done his work perfectly. Holly, listen to me very carefully, I said, keeping my voice low and calm. I am not looking for you. I am sitting in a diner with Ren. I don't have a gun. The police didn't find me because I wasn't there. Soren Fairfax is lying to you. Soren, Holly gasped, clearly pulling the phone away from her face. Soren, he's on the line. He's on Ren's phone. Holly, stop. I barked. Damien put your name on the Cayman Islands account. You own the stolen money. There was a scuffle on the other end of the line. The sound of a phone being snatched. Mr. Keating, a smooth, impeccably calm voice said. Soren Fairfax. You're making a mistake, Soren, I said cold. I don't think so, Grant, Fairfax replied lightly. You're violating a temporary restraining order by contacting my client through a third party. I'm documenting this call, and I suggest you turn yourself in. The local authorities are very anxious to speak with you. If you put her on that plane, you're an accessory to kidnapping. Fairfax chuckled softly. She's coming willingly, Grant. She's terrified of you. Who wouldn't be? A disgruntled, unstable man who just sabotaged a major tech summit and is now stalking his estranged wife. We're simply providing her sanctuary. I have the backdoor logs. Fairfax, I know what Damien did. I'm sure you have all sorts of fascinating delusions, Fairfax said smoothly. Have a good night, Grant. We won't be speaking again. The line clicked and went dead. I sat back in the vinyl booth. The diner suddenly felt suffocatingly small. Ren was staring at me, tears spilling over her eyelashes. They're taking her. Grant, they're taking her right now. I looked out the diner window at the dark highway. If Holly got on that plane, Vanguard won. They would feed her lies in Aspen until she signed the affidavits, and then they would hand her to the FBI on a silver platter to protect the firm's reputation. Do you know which airport? I asked Ren. Austin executive Ren choked out. Soren mentioned it earlier when he booked the suite. It's the private terminal in Pflugerville. It was a 20-minute drive. I checked my watch. The charter wouldn't have engines running yet if they were just leaving the hotel. Private flights need clearance, and Vanguard's pilots would need time to prep the jet. I stood up, grabbing the clean laptop and the burner phone. What are you doing? Ren asked, wiping her face. I'm going to the airport, I said. You can't. Grant, Soren has private security with him. If you show up there, they'll call the cops. They'll tell them you're the armed stalker. They'll shoot you. I'm not going to the terminal, I said, pulling a $20 bill from my wallet and tossing it on the table. I'm going to the perimeter fence. Private terminals run on independent unsecured tower relays for ground logistics. If I can get within a quarter mile of that hangar, I don't need a gun. I looked down at Ren. I'm going to ground the plane. I left Ren at the diner with strict instructions. She was to drive to the gas station half a mile from the Austin executive main gate and wait with her engine running. I took the Honda. I drove with the headlights off for the last quarter mile, bumping along a dirt utility road that ran parallel to the airport's eastern perimeter fence. I parked behind a cluster of scrub oaks, grabbed my canvas duffel, and walked the rest of the way to the chain link barrier. Through the wire, the airfield was a flat expanse of dark concrete, illuminated by harsh amber floodlights. Vanguard Capital leased Hangar 4, a massive corrugated steel structure near the far end of the taxiway. The heavy rolling doors were already parting. Inside, sitting under brilliant white halogens, was a Gulfstream G280. I crouched in the tall grass, unzipped the duffel, and pulled out the clean laptop. I booted it up, tethered to my burner phone, and started scanning. Private aviation hangars aren't secured like military installations. They are run by the same lazy, cost-cutting property management companies that run commercial office parks. The environmental controls, the security cameras, the magnetic door locks, they were all tied into a central cloud-based IoT network, so the hangar manager could monitor the building from an iPad on his couch. I had pulled Vanguard's internal IP routing tables weeks ago when I first set up my tracking protocol on Damien. I found the subnet for hangar Hangar 4 in less than 60 seconds. Port 80 was closed. The main administrative login was secured behind two-factor authentication, but the maintenance port, the digital backdoor left open by the HVAC contractors so they wouldn't have to drive out for routine diagnostic checks, was sitting there, wide open, protected by a default factory password. Admin, password 123. I was in. I looked through the fence. Two black SUVs sped across the tarmac and pulled up right to the edge of the hangar. The doors popped open. I saw Soren Fairfax step out first, his expensive suit catching the floodlights. He reached back and grabbed Holly by the elbow, steering her quickly toward the Gulfstream's boarding stairs. She looked terrified, clutching a small overnight bag to her chest, her head on a swivel. The pilots were already in the cockpit. The plane's auxiliary power unit was whining, a high-pitched mechanical scream preparing the main turbines for ignition. If she walked up those stairs, she was gone. I didn't try to hack the plane. I didn't try to mess with the control tower's radio frequencies. I just opened the hangar's environmental safety menu, found the fire suppression system, and manually triggered the emergency test protocol. I hit enter. A deafening klaxon erupted from the hangar, echoing across the flat Texas landscape. Red strobe lights began flashing violently along the roofline. For a split second, Fairfax and his private security guys just stood there, confused. Then the ceiling valves blew open. Aviation hangars don't use water sprinklers. They use chemical foam suppression systems designed to smother jet fuel fires in seconds. Thousands of gallons of thick, blinding, heavy white foam cascaded down from the rafters in a massive, localized blizzard. It hammered the fuselage of the Gulfstream. It buried the two black SUVs. Fairfax shouted something, waving his arms, but he was instantly blinded by the deluge. He slipped on the slick concrete and went down hard. His security guys scrambled, completely losing their grip on Holly. The pilot immediately killed the Gulfstream's APU. If those turbines sucked in that chemical foam, the multi-million-dollar engines would be destroyed. The flight was grounded. I pulled out my burner phone and called Ren. The fire alarms just tripped, I said, watching the chaos through the fence. The system automatically dispatches the Pflugerville Fire Department. They're going to roll up to the main gate in about 2 minutes, and the local police will be escorting them. Vanguard security can't stop emergency services from entering the perimeter. I see the fire trucks coming down the highway now, Ren said, her voice breathless. Pull in right behind them. When they open the gate for the engines, you go through. Holly is standing on the tarmac outside Hangar 4. She's separated from Fairfax. Get her in the car and drive away. I hung up, closed the laptop, and slipped it back into my bag. 3 minutes later, a convoy of red fire engines and two black and white police cruisers tore onto the tarmac, sirens wailing, completely overwhelming Fairfax's private security detail. In the confusion of the flashing lights and shouting firemen, I saw Ren's silver sedan skid to a halt near the edge of the foam perimeter. Holly, covered in white chemical retardant, broke away from the group and ran to the car. She threw herself into the passenger seat. Ren slammed it into reverse, spun the wheel, and drove off the airfield before anyone in a suit could stop her. I turned my back to the runway, walked to the Honda, and drove back to my motel room. The next morning, Declan Aldrich and I walked into the lobby of the Travis County Federal Courthouse. The air conditioning was freezing, and the marble floors echoed with the sound of our footsteps. Ren and Holly were already sitting on a wooden bench outside the U.S. Attorney's office. Holly looked completely hollowed out. She was wearing a plain gray sweater, her hair pulled back into a messy knot. She didn't look like the polished, ambitious woman who had walked into the tech summit 24 hours earlier. She looked exhausted, broken. When she saw me, she stood up. She opened her mouth to speak, her eyes welling with tears, but no words came out. Did she read the Cayman documents? I asked Ren, completely ignoring Holly. Ren nodded. We went through everything at my apartment last night. The offshore accounts, the IP routing, Damien's timeline. She knows. Holly let out a small, jagged sob. Grant, I didn't know. I swear to God I didn't know what he was doing. He told me it was just a scraper tool for the divorce. He told me he was protecting me. He framed you, I said, my voice entirely flat. He stole $4 million, put your name on the bank account, and used my house to do it. Soren Fairfax wasn't trying to protect you last night. He was trying to isolate you in Aspen so they could groom you into signing a sworn confession. She buried her face in her hands, crying silently. We don't have time for apologies, Declan said briskly, stepping between us. He looked at Holly. My client has absolute proof that Damien Cole installed malware on his personal network. You are the only person who had physical access to that machine when the malware was installed. If you walk into this office and tell the assistant U.S. attorney the exact truth, that Damien gave you the drive, that you installed it under false pretenses, and that Soren Fairfax attempted to forcibly relocate you to prevent you from discovering the fraud, you walk away with full immunity. If you lie to protect Damien, you will go to federal prison for a very long time. Do you understand? Holly dropped her hands. She looked at me, searching my face for any trace of the husband she used to have, any trace of softness or forgiveness. She found nothing. I'll tell them everything, she whispered. And she did. The dominoes fell with brutal mechanical efficiency. By noon, the assistant U.S. attorney had subpoenaed the unredacted digital ledgers I had pulled from Vanguard's servers. By 2 o'clock, the FBI raided Damien's penthouse and seized all his hardware. By 4 o'clock, Vanguard Capital held an emergency board meeting. When the board realized Damien had left a digital paper trail pointing directly to their own executive network, they panicked. They didn't rally behind him. They threw him to the wolves to save the firm. They fired Soren Fairfax's law firm, issued a public statement condemning Damien's actions, and fully cooperated with the federal investigation. Soren Fairfax's emergency ex parte motion for a psychological hold on me was quietly and immediately withdrawn. The temporary restraining order vanished. At 9:00 a.m. the following Tuesday, my bank reversed the fraudulent wire transfer. The $83,500 reappeared in my checking account. I immediately transferred it to a new, single-owner account at a different credit union. Damien Cole was indicted on 14 counts of wire fraud, corporate embezzlement, and violating the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. Because he had utilized Vanguard's infrastructure across state lines, the charges carried mandatory minimums. His assets were frozen permanently. His solid gold Rolex Daytona was locked in an FBI evidence room. 2 weeks later, I was standing in the empty kitchen of the rental house in East Austin. I was packing the last of my things into cardboard boxes. I had terminated the lease early. I was moving to a quiet apartment complex on the north side of town, closer to my firm. Holt Novak had called me 3 days ago, practically begging begging me to come back to work. Vanguard had dropped their threats against the IT firm, and Holt had realized exactly what kind of asset he had suspended. I told him I'd return, but only if he bumped my salary by 30% and let me work entirely remote. He agreed before I even finished the sentence. The front door opened. I turned around. Holly was standing in the doorway. She didn't have her keys anymore. I had changed all the locks the day after the airport, but I had left the door unlocked for her today so she could pick up the last of her clothes. She walked into the kitchen. She looked around the empty room, her eyes lingering on the spot where my laptop used to sit. I got a job, she said quietly, at a boutique marketing agency downtown. It doesn't pay much, but Ren is letting me stay in her guest room until I save up for my own place. That's good, I said, taping a box shut. Damien's lawyers called me, she said, her voice wavering slightly. They wanted to know if I'd testify as a character witness for his sentencing hearing, to argue that he's not a malicious person, just misguided. I picked up a Sharpie and wrote Kitchen Misc on the cardboard. What did you say? I told them to lose my number. She folded her arms across her chest, hugging herself. Grant, I know I can't undo it. I know I destroyed what we had, but I want you to know I'm sorry. Not just because I got caught, because I was stupid and I was cruel to you, and you didn't deserve it. I looked at her, really looked at her. There was no anger left in me, no desire for revenge. The adrenaline was gone, replaced by a deep, quiet clarity. You weren't stupid, Holly, I said evenly. You just wanted a different life, and you were willing to step on me to get it. She flinched, the words hitting her like a physical strike. Grant, the divorce papers are on the kitchen island, I said, cutting her off. My lawyer drew them up yesterday. Standard asset division based on what's left. I didn't touch your 401k, and you don't touch mine. Sign them and leave them on the counter. I'll file them tomorrow. I picked up the box, walked past her, and headed out the front door. I didn't look back. I put the box in the trunk of the Honda, shut it, and got into the driver's seat. I rolled down the windows, letting the warm Texas air fill the car. I put it in gear and drove away, leaving her standing alone in the empty house.